Okay, that just leaves me now to hand over to our presenter for today, Yen Chen. Yen.
Hi, everybody. Okay, can you hear me? I hope so. Okay, anyway, good afternoon from sunny Malaysia, although today is not very sunny. I'm going to start off by just telling you a little bit about myself, okay, and about what we're going to cover today, all right? So the title for today's workshop is Tools for Remote Learning for First Language English and English Literature. So it's broken into 3 parts: before the class, planning your work, part 2, during the class, making it work, and after the class, marking and giving feedback. All right. So I hope you're in the right course. Thank you so much for waking up early if you're on that part of the world, and I hope to make your time worthwhile. All right. So a little bit about me. I am born and bred in Malaysia. I'm now in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So hello to those who are also in Malaysia. I have been a teacher for over 20 years and with Cambridge in terms of teaching Cambridge IGCSE for about 10 years. And I just joined Cambridge as a trainer less than probably 1.5 to 2 years, just very much in training as well. So, but the school that I'm at, I'm very privileged to be in a school which is an Apple Distinguished School. What that means is they promote Apple technology and Apple devices. So we are given a MacBook and iPads. So during the crazy season of the pandemic, the turnover from live classes to online classes was rather smooth, I must say, and it's just been a privilege to be able to do that very quickly just with the technology around school. So what I'm going to be sharing today is very much based on my experience. I'm not Apple trained, not in any way trained, probably just a simple teacher like many of you. And we've just had to pivot and had to change over the past year in order to make online learning work. So here are some tips, real life tips in terms of how I think it has worked in order to make online learning more engaging. Another thing would be is that because I had a team of teachers, and a lot of the things I'm teaching here are things that I learned from them as well, because I've taught mainly KS4 and KS5. So, but a lot of the things here that I'm sharing are useful throughout secondary or even primary sometimes. So I want to give that credit to the team of teachers that I work with as well. All right. Okay, and I will attempt to answer as many questions as you may have at the end of the session. All right. Going to my next slide. Okay, so part 1, before the class, planning and preparation. I'm assuming from wherever you are in the world, all of us would have had some experience or some sort of connection with having to teach online. So some of the things we need to remember, or I think it's one of the things that are important would be 2 things: the type of devices our learners have and the reliability of our learners' Wi-Fi connection. So firstly, I'm going to look at the type of devices our learners have. So we have to take into consideration whether our learners are on their mobile phones or are they on their iPads or tablets, and what size is that? Are they on their laptops or is it on the desktop? All right. The reason for this is it will determine the type of slides we create and the type of activities that you do. So for example, in this slide in the picture, if we have lots of words and a passage that we need our learners to focus on, obviously doing it on a small smartphone is really eye-taxing. It's really difficult as compared to a laptop or a desktop, for example. So I think these are considerations that we need to take, because sometimes we forget that a passage like this may very well be easily accessed by us, because we're looking at it through, I'm assuming, a laptop or a computer screen. But to some of our learners, they don't have that sort of a privilege. So what can we do? We can probably break it into chunks, paragraph by paragraph, and make it into more slides. It's more work for us, but in terms of having the students access the material, it's definitely more useful in that sense. All right. So number one, it's what sort of devices our learners are on. Part B or 1B is our learners' Wi-Fi connection. Okay, we need to ascertain the reliability of our learners' Wi-Fi. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it reliable? Is it intermittent? And if it is reliable, there are a lot of live activities that we can do. For example, Kahoot, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that, and Nearpod as well. And if it is unreliable, then we have to start thinking of alternatives, all right? So I'm going to just show you some pictures of how we can do Kahoot. Of course, this is a Kahoot game which needs reliable Wi-Fi. Students need to be there in real time. Similarly, if you are not yet familiar, there is a free app on Google Slide that you can add, and that's called Nearpod. And that's also a very interactive app, I suppose, or additional thing to what we can use on Google Slides, where you can have students type in immediate answers. There's a little game where they can compete. And as I said, these are useful tools because you're using them on Google Slides. Just go onto Google Slides, and once you've created your most of your Google Slides, go to add-ons and go to Nearpod as on the screen and go to open Nearpod. It's a free login. Of course, for a free login, there are limited access to the available number of slides that you can do, but I think it's good enough for what I want to use. You can pay for Nearpod, but that's a whole different story altogether, okay? So those were just examples of things that you would need to do if we had limitations in Wi-Fi. Now, another way we could do it is that if we are limited in our Wi-Fi, you need to pre-record yourself. So I've done this before to pre-record myself, and then you either email it to your students or put it on Google Classroom. So what students do is, in their own time, they would need to download your pre-recorded video and then play it and watch it. It's kind of like a lesson that's pre-recorded. Of course, with something that's pre-recorded, you don't want it to be so long. So I've got two videos here as an example. If our moderator could assist me with that, that's video 1 and video 2. If you could give us some time to get to that. Perfect. Okay, video 1 is me teaching literature, and this was during the pandemic, and I recorded myself literally taking pictures of the book that I'm teaching. So I open the page and I take a photo of it, and then I use it as a picture, and I start recording myself. So if our moderator could play the short video.
Okay, good morning. Now, this prologue, I suppose, that is here before chapter 1. Okay. It says part 1, walking. Now, Revelation is the last book of the Christian Bible, and the book of Revelation, the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, is where the world ends. And so Christ comes to kind of like, it is a metaphorical book with images of the devil as evil and Christ.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. That's kind of a little bit of how I kind of started off quite jittery in my recording. And I'll show you video 2. So once I got that video together in about 9 to 10 minutes, just as an introduction to what was happening in my lesson, then I got my students to record themselves as well. So if we could do video 2, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to load that up now. Just bear with me a moment.
So just give us a moment. Okay, we are loading up video 2. This is my student recording himself doing an analysis that I requested. So I'll get the moderator to play that for us. Thank you.
Okay, hi guys, Leonard here. I'm going to be doing the analysis for the last part of chapter 4. Starts at page 91. Okay, it starts with this line over here. Wait a minute. All right, so as I'm sure it has been established by the previous pages, you know, something has changed within her. I mean, within Wanja, I mean. And
okay, so there you go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay, so there you go. We will go back to our slides. Once the students got the hang of doing that, we'll go back to our slides. Then it just made it easier because I wasn't constrained to just doing a lesson during our class or during when we were online. So what happened was that when I knew there would be occasions where it was difficult for students to be online or our connection was really, really poor. Yes, he was having a good time, my student. I would pre-record. And of course, with older students, you might want to give that responsibility over to them as well and say, you take chapter 1, you take chapter 2, chapter 3, and things like that. And once it's all loaded into Google Classroom, then the students also take responsibility to go and download that and watch it in their own time. And the good thing about that is, of course, if they're stuck, they can kind of come back to it whenever they want to. But we need to bear in mind that because this is additional time for the students, also not to overload them in terms of the work that's given. All right. So that is in planning our lessons, and when we have real-time problems in terms of Wi-Fi. The third point would be probably to provide the link to a video you want our students to watch first, and then get on with Zoom or with Meets or whatever app that you use. So what I mean is that a lot of us may use the YouTube links, and sometimes we share it over our Zoom meetings. For example, just like what happened just now. Some of you couldn't see the video or you couldn't hear the video, and that's probably due to various other reasons. Some of us could hear it fine, all right? So that's just a classic example of how technology works in what weird ways, where some students hear it and some students don't. So we may want to just give them the link ahead of time, maybe at the start of the class, and tell them that come back in 10 minutes and we're going to start the lesson, but you have to have watched the video first, okay? So those are possible solutions if you have a slow Wi-Fi. So to sum up point 1 in terms of planning and preparing our lesson, 2 things is the type of devices our learners have, and number 2, the reliability of the Wi-Fi connection that they have, all right? Once we know this, or once we are more certain of this, then we can take control of the things that we prepare, the lessons that we prepare, but do know that you need to mix and match sometimes, okay? It can't all just be a pre-recorded lesson because students also need that personal touch of us answering questions on the spot, and it also can't always be a photograph that's just sent to them or just something very static, okay? So mix and match different things for different lessons, different purposes. When there's a variety of things and they all work in different ways, then it will be great, okay? Now, my next point would be that during the class, making it work, right? So here I'm going to be sharing my slides, my screen very soon. I hope that works. Now, while we're delivering the content, we want to ensure engagement and involvement, right? So we have to decide some of these things. Are we going to use slides? Are we not going to use slides? What type of slides are we going to use? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to talk about using Google Slides and Docs and sharing your laptop screen. So I'm going to share my laptop screen and let's see if this works. Here we go. Okay. All right, so you see my screen now. Now, so one of the things that I want to talk about would be when we use a when we use slides, all right? So I talked about using slides, and the font size, the color, and the whole purpose of the slide needs to be clear first, all right? Are we using a slide like this just to give direction and information to our students or our learners, like this is what we're going to talk about today, this is the learning objective? Do we use it as a picture in order to stir ideas? Is it a starter or is it a plenary? So this is really simple, and the picture is bigger and the words are smaller. Are we using slides in order to provide information? All right. If it's to provide information, then of course there are more words to that, and it's very. We need to be watchful not to crowd the slide with too many words. But for example, if it's like this, then you kind of have no choice. You want to give them a passage, okay? But is this the best way to use our slide? So we have to think about what the purpose of the slide is first, and then to see what sort of slides we create. Slides are not the only way to go. It's just a good way to direct our students. It's also a great way to check your answers, just in case students can't catch them as we speak. So it's great to put them up. Okay, so this is an example for first language English. All right, so that's the slides that we use. The next thing that I'm talking about is using Google Classrooms. So I'm going to go to my Google Classroom. As I said, right, everything is about me sharing from, okay, this, okay, this one, all right. This is a Google slide, all right. So in Google Slides, what you can do is you can actually prepare some standard slides. For example, my slide number 2 talks about name all the characters thus far introduced to us in Act 1. And what I do with this is I share the link with my students, and I get them all to get into the link, and then I will get them to work on it in real time, okay? So how that looks like will be something like, probably like this, okay? Right, so probably like this. Okay, so here's a student who's preparing Act 2 on one of the plays that we are doing. And so it's done between 2 students by the name of Luke and Elizabeth. So I will get Luke and Elizabeth to send me their link, or I send them the link, and they are typing it in real time, and I can see what they're typing, what are they saying in terms of the content that they get, what are the insights that they get. And of course, I prepare the materials first, or your directions just need to be really, really specific and really, really precise. These are high-level students, so I kind of gave it to them and said, analyze Act 2 and the character of Walter Lee in Act 2. So these are some slides that they came up with. Now, another way we could do that is to move Act to Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and things like that. So these students are analyzing and looking for quotes from the text that we are studying, and so they've come up with slides like these. What I do after this is I get the students to share their links with the entire class, so everyone has everybody else's link, and they actually do a presentation online, as we're having Zoom. We use Zoom a lot. So as the student is presenting, they can actually be sharing their screen and going from Act 1 to Act 2 and so on and so forth. Or if a student's Wi-Fi is not quick enough for the slides to show on Zoom, then at least the student their classmates at home will already have the link to the slides, and they can have this as a reference. Okay, so this is, and it's really simple to set up. Get the students to copy paste the slide themselves. Okay, so for example, this is for Group 1. So you'll just have to put their names here, Group 1. And then you copy paste the slide, right? So I put the exact same slide there, and this one has to be Group 2. So everyone's answers comes out on the same slide. I don't have to go through every various links. This is another way to do it. So what I'm going to do is to show you another one, whereby this one is on family. So she's done her slides on how family is presented in this particular text. So look at the possibilities that the students show us in that sense. You know, sometimes they also become very creative in terms of how they see a play or how they perceive a character just by some of the comments that they put. So something that is really great about this, it's also giving the students some ownership about the things that they're sharing, regardless of whether we're online or whether we're in person. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Now, I'm talking about Google Classroom next. Okay, where is my Google Classroom? Right. Okay, so this is my Google Classroom, and many of you would already be aware of the various things that we can post up other than just putting in an announcement or a task. Under marks, right at the top here, you can actually monitor the marks that are given to the students or whether or not the student has or has not handed in. So one thing to note is that if a task is not being accessed, you can also change that in terms of when you're assigning the work, okay? So in terms of classwork, that's one way we can put the things in there as well. You can assign it to them, and then you can see how many have been assigned, how many have handed it in, and as you mark, you can also monitor that. So Google Classroom, I'm sure, is not an unfamiliar piece to you, right? Okay, so some things that you may want to know about Google Classroom would be the ways that we can provide that feedback. I'll show it here on a regular Google slide. Did you know that you can record your feedback? Not exactly record, or at least get the computer to type it out for you. So under a Google slide, if you go to Tools and you go to Voice Type Speaker Notes, if you're feeling a little bit tired from typing, or it's just a lot to talk or a lot to type, you can type. You can put on the click on this voice type. So as you speak, it should type up for you what you want to say, and then just look back at it and correct it to see if it works. Okay, and I'm sure there are many other ways in order to do this, and these are just some of the ways that I found really useful. Okay, next. One last slide I'd like to show you would be this one. Oh, this one later then. Okay, now one other thing that I go to, another link that I go to is something called CommonLit. Now, CommonLit is again a free app, and you can log on to it quite easily as a teacher, and it's got lots of material in terms of the content and the various genre. And you can assign classes to it. It can link to your Google Classroom. And after that, the good thing about it is that when the students see the task that you've given them, they can only see question 2 if they've done question 1, and so on and so forth. So CommonLit is something that I use maybe 10% of the time, just because sometimes preparing material online gets so difficult and it's really tiring as well. So what I've done is that I've tried to, as I said, mix and match, right? So you can do various things with it. So I would encourage you to go have a look, see what happens, what you can do. I'm sure you can do many more things than what I have. You can assign a class code where students can log in. You can see their performance. It gives you a pie chart and things like that. Also, it has various levels as well. Okay, sorry, wrong class to show you. All right, so that brings me to my next slide. I'll stop sharing for now, and if we can go back to our slides, please. All right. Right, so after the class, marking and feedback. So I've covered in that sense how we prepare our class. Number 2, how to ensure that the class runs as smoothly as possible. And so I come to number 3, which is after the class. How do we mark and how do we give feedback when it's all virtual? It's tiring, it's so time consuming, and Google Classroom is one way to do it. And if you teach higher year groups, it's really difficult to always ask the students to type in their answers, because you want to prepare them for the exams where it's all handwritten. So what do you do? So I've gotten my students to do things like handwriting, handwrite their essays, and as they complete that, then they send it to me in a nicely taken photo, clear photo, or an app that I like to use is Cam Scanner, because it scans it in really nicely in one piece. And what you do after that is to mark it either on your device. If you have the benefit of a printer, you can print it out and then mark it just like you would a hard copy, and then you take a picture and send it back to them. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Or you could also do it on your iPad or your tablet if you have a tablet. Okay, so just two more things that I want to show you in terms of sharing my content. Here we go. So I'm going to share my slides. Coming back to my slides. This one. All right. So here's an example of what has just happened a few minutes before school. Let me see. Okay, a student sends in a request through Hangout, right? Requesting for me to mark a paper. And you see, they can send it in however they want to. All right, I hope you're seeing this. Can you see this? Anyway, so they ask me to help them mark something, and then so I'll just have to log it up, and then after that to blow it up on my computer screen, or I can give a verbal feedback, and there are just various ways to do that. After that, if you're using good old Word document, good old Word document also works, because you're able to give feedback just by keying in information. For example, where's all my stuff? Okay, this one. I'm sorry, are you seeing this? Are you guys seeing this? My Word document?
Yeah, we can see everything.
Yes, okay, cool. All right, cool, thank you very much, because I can't see it on my iPad. Anyway, so look at this. This is an essay that the student wrote for one of the literature papers. And sometimes when we highlight stuff in order to add a comment, it leaves a really long trail of information on the right, correct? So what I do is I type in my feedback, and I just put it in a different color. I just put it in a different color, and they will know that this is my feedback to them. Okay, so this is one way that I started doing, just because adding that comment on the right was really lengthy. But of course, good old Word document, you can add a comment here and then put in your feedback, just like how you would if you were marking a paper. Okay, so that's one way to do it. And the final way to do it that I want to show you is this is on my iPad. So the student has sent me in a document. I either take a picture of it or it's in PDF, and I kind of like just write everywhere, right? And I think the good thing about having tablet would be you can play with the colors because they have so many different colors with that, right? So that is the sharing in terms of feedback. So I'm going to stop sharing. If I could go back to my final slides, please. Thank you. Right. Sorry, just give us a minute. Okay, so taking photos of hard copies of marked work and just making it happen, right? So after I've taken photos of the hard copies of things that I've marked, I just scan them in or take a photo with my phone. Usually a phone will make it easier, and then I just email it back to my students, all right? So in summary, in the past 30 minutes, I've tried to give you as much content as possible in terms of preparing for our class and making it work during the class, taking into consideration all the different things that could possibly go wrong and would probably go wrong. And the last part, which we always or sometimes forget, it's the marking and the feedback, and that's really tedious. It sometimes takes up even more time than preparing the work the work or the lesson by itself. Yeah, so be kind on ourselves. Make sure you don't overload yourself by giving too much work. It's sometimes easy to think we're giving a lot of value to the students if we give them a lot of work to do. But the thing is, if we're not able to give them the feedback, then it's also really redundant in a sense. So sometimes I'd rather give the students one paragraph to complete a really solid paragraph on the literature analysis as compared to an entire essay, just because online learning can be really tedious and tiring, straining both for the students and for us as well. Okay, so just one last slide would be that quote from Robert Kiyosaki, nothing to do with education, but I think online learning has taught us that, you know, we learn from everywhere and everything. So sometimes we win, sometimes we learn. We've just got to make sure that we're positive in everything that we do. Never stop learning in terms of finding out from your students. How do you do this? How do you do that? What's a good way that another teacher has done? So ask questions to your students as well. They are probably definitely more savvy than us in using technology. So get your questions answered by them as well. All right. So my next slide is about questions. So I'm going to leave this to the moderator to assist me. What are some of the questions that I can address? Okay, so I'm just looking through the questions. Another thing to remember is that there are loads and loads of applications available. Excuse me for a bit. Let me take a drink. Okay, excuse me. Now, so I'm seeing a lot of good ideas coming up on the chat box as well. Jamboard, Miro, just regular whiteboard, which is available in many apps as well. Those are just like whiteboards that you can use, that you screen up as if you were writing on a whiteboard. And there's loads and loads of things that are available for free, okay? So my advice would be to just look at one or two things that you can add every now and then to your teaching, because use what works for you, and don't be pressured to make it extremely interesting or engaging, just like a science lesson or something like that, because in the end we are teaching language, and it's a lot to do with words. So a lot of times it's giving that content through just words, basically. So we're just looking for the best way to do that, okay? So, Mr. Moderator, are there any specific questions that seem to be coming up, please?
Sure. So we've just had one in asking, how can we make more effective online classes?
I think, thank you for that. I think the most effective online classes are the classes where you know what the objective is, just like a live, excuse me, a live class. Is it just to introduce new content? Is it to give affirmation about a particular content that you've already done? Or is it to go through and answer a sample essay that a student has done? So once we know our objective, then when we plan our lessons, sometimes you don't even need slides. If we are able to upload the material into Google Classroom and tell the students, everyone look at this material, and I'm going to go through it paragraph by paragraph. So I think a lot of it is pre-preparing with having in mind that the students can't see you point at a particular paragraph. They can't see you as if you were live in front of them. So if a passage has 6 paragraphs, then you may want to label the paragraphs, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, just because sometimes, regardless of what age the student is or what level the student is, they can get really confused. So if you say paragraph 3 and it starts with the final group of students or something like that, sometimes it just helps to be even clearer, even more detailed than we naturally or usually would. I think that makes an online lesson work quicker and better for me. Of course, we will always have that 1 or 2 students, once you've gone through the entire passage, then they kind of go like, Miss, which passage are we talking about? That will always happen. We have them in Malaysia, just like you probably have them in your country. So we want to reduce that as much as possible. One thing I find useful would be to ask students to type into the chat box. For example, I say, okay, if you're looking at paragraph 2, which is what I want you to look at, type 7 in the chat box. So they type in the number 7 in the chat box. For example, they would do this, okay? Just type it in the chat box. So as I see people typing in 77777, I know, number one, they're paying attention, they're actually listening to me, and they heard me in terms of the instructions, all right? Sometimes if you're just asking yes or no, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, you don't understand, they probably didn't hear our question, and they're probably just going to give you a thumbs up anyway. So it's not as effective as giving a specific instruction on what the student needs to do for a certain time, for a certain task. Sometimes a lot of creativity also comes in handy. I've done crazy things like wearing crazy Christmas hats or top hats just to capture the students' attention. And mind you, I teach KS4 and 5, so it's not like I'm teaching primary. So it's just making it as engaging and as not monotonous. Don't make it monotonous within our teaching, and I hope this hasn't been for you. So someone's asking if we need we need slides for online classes. I don't think slides are a must, but us talking all the time is also boring. I mean, imagine going for a class 4 times a week, if it's English, where we meet the students really often, and it's just the teacher talking, and it's just the teacher saying, okay, refer to this article or in Google Classroom where I've posted it up. So it can be really draggy and it can be really monotonous as well. So remember my slide on mix and match. Mix and match various things. Of course, a class can just run by us talking and saying, this is the article, it's in Google Classroom or it's in your email, open it up, and we're going to go paragraph by paragraph. Of course, content-wise, it's all there. The information is passed on. But in terms of engaging our students and making it easier for them to enjoy our lesson, we need to take into consideration that they would have been facing the screen for long hours, and it's taxing for all of us, and definitely for teachers as well. I think ever since in my school, ever since we've come back to online, to live learning, what we've found is, regardless of whether the student previously was a high ability student or a low ability student or a good learner or a weak learner in that sense, everyone's attention span has reduced. Do you not find that yourselves? I can mark like for 15, 20, 30 minutes non-stop previously, if it's an essay, you know, keep on going. But now when I mark after 7 minutes, I kind of go, I got to catch, you know, a drink of coffee or something else, just because our attention spans have been turned upside down in various ways. So think about how we can engage our students, whether it's with slides, whether it's with a video, or whether it's with getting them to do group work in a breakout room using Google Slides. As I mentioned, knowing your learning objective is really, really important, okay?
We've had another question earlier on asking how can we improve the speaking performance of learners online?
Okay, I'm assuming that, thank you, James. So in terms of the speaking, I'm assuming we're talking about the speaking and listening component within first language. I actually schedule students to have a session with one-on-one session with me, or a small group of students, 3 to 4 students. I think what's important is that we are affirmed that whatever we are doing with our students is valuable time given to them. I'm not sure about the school and the situation that you're in, but it's good to be able to give students time off as well. So if you've got 4 periods or 5 weeks of English a week and your focus is on speaking and listening, I schedule 3 students for 15 minutes, another 3 for 15 minutes, and for all the other times the students are doing either their own revision or doing some other task that I've set for them. So the other 20 odd students are not coming on Zoom with me, but I'm only seeing those that small group of students for 15 minutes and running through with them. And having smaller group of students allows for the shyer, more reserved students to actually speak, to actually say something as compared to a Zoom class, yeah? So for our speaking and listening 0500 that our school is doing, we had one-on-one sessions with students as if they were right in front of us. We had them turn on their cameras. We never knew whether they were reading from their pre-prepared speech or whether it was just memorized, but it doesn't matter because it was the talking that was engaging. So don't feel that you have to always have a full 50-minute session of lessons, because teaching is not limited to that Zoom lesson. Teaching can happen in so many different ways. A 15-minute session with a smaller group may make a bigger difference in circumstances like these because we are online as compared to hours and hours of just having an entire class, and many students may slip under the radar just because of that, yeah? Okay, cool. I think we may or may not have time for one more question. If not, yeah, whichever way is fine.
We've got a little bit of time. We've had a few technical questions. So the first question was quite earlier on. It was, how do you record a video over a still image?
Okay. I'm just going to give you a live demonstration. I think with your phone, what my husband tells me is that the specs on a phone is better than an iPad or a MacBook, just because it's a phone. So if you are limited in resources, so you have your text as your novel or your passage, and you can either be holding the passage down and having your camera just above, which is really tricky, and you just start talking and just start writing as well. So that's one seemingly primitive way to do it. What I do is I actually take a picture of the page or the passage that I want to talk about, and then on my iPad, as I said, I am privileged to have the tablet and the iPad together with an iPad pencil, so that may be something you want to think of investing into. And so there is a way to record yourself and record the screen as well. So look it up on YouTube. And as I'm talking and as I'm writing on my iPad, it's recording everything that I'm doing, just like you saw in the earlier videos that you had, okay? So what I've seen myself doing a lot is taking pictures of a lot of pages and then sending it to my iPad, and having the iPad open up as a document, as a PDF, or even as a photo, like a picture, taking my iPad pencil, turning on the recording function, and then I start talking and I start writing on that. And it saves as a video of 7 to 15 minutes, and then you just have to send it off to your students, all right? Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, we've had another technical question. How do you remove an unmarked assignment from your Google Classroom mark sheet? Or even better, ensure it's not loaded onto your Classroom mark sheet?
Oh, all right. Okay, thank you for that. On Google Classroom, when you assign a task, you can also remove the marks on the right column. That means you can change the marks. It's automatically at 100, but you can change it to 10 or to 8 or to 24 or to 26 or whatever it is, or you can remove it altogether. And so that becomes a task that is just submitted into Google Classroom, but you are not, you're telling the students this is not a marked piece in terms of giving a grade or a mark to it. You may need to mark it and give feedback, but it's not marks per se, right? Okay, that's as much as I understand from it, yeah. Yeah, but go play around with Google Classroom. As I mentioned, I learned this from my team of teachers. I used Google Classroom a lot during the online learning and then I had to shift it back to getting the students to write their answers because it was getting nearer to exam time. And so a lot of things that were typed in were great, but then as I mentioned, you need to get our students to time themselves as well and to practice their handwriting as well. All right. So I'm seeing one comment. In online classes, is it good to give a worksheet for the students as homework or have to assign some activity? That is a great question. Again, it's absolutely up to you. In my school, we see the students 3 to 4 times in terms of English and then 3 times for literature. So I play around with the type of activities that I give. If it's a Monday, for example, it could be content heavy. So it's a full class of Zoom. We have Zoom for 40 minutes and you come back for the next session and it's a lot of content that's being given. And then I tell them, okay, tomorrow we're having a double period. The first period, I'm going to give 15 minutes of instruction. And after that, you have 1 hour to complete an essay. I will be on Zoom or I will be on Hangout, but you don't need to be on Zoom. But from 9:15, you start your essay. You have to submit it by 10:15. So at 10:15, you start chasing them. You kind of start writing emails and Hangout messages like, okay, guys, it's 10:15. You should be submitting them in either on Google Classroom or your email. So you variety of methods. Definitely a mix and match. If not, either the students will burn out or we will burn out because sometimes giving an overload of messages and articles and questions to answer, think about it, you have to mark all those as well, and it sometimes is not humanly feasible, and it's also not kind on ourselves or our family because it's a lot of extra, not extra, it's a lot of after class work as well, right? All right, so I've talked about how to help with speaking. Okay, in terms of students being assisted by parents or they use Google to look for answers during online lessons, we have that issue as well. I think it's just a worldwide issue. One way that I have colleagues using is to do a Google form. This is a whole different thing altogether. So my colleague prepares a Google form whereby she copy-pastes the question of, let's just say question 1 to 10. She's got question 1 to 10 prepared in a Google form, and the answer selection is as per whatever she wants. And so she's getting them to answer it in Google form, and they submit it at a certain time. It makes marking a little bit easier, but it doesn't answer your question of how to deter parents from assisting. I think it's just, it may not be a bad thing that parents are being involved. Of course, if parents are overly contributing to their child's answers, then maybe just an email home, which is tricky as well because you don't want to suggest to the parent that the child is cheating. So I think it's a lot of parent-child teacher relationship in terms of like, hey, it's great that your child is, you're assisting your child. But I think at KS4, KS5 levels, a lot of it is independent work. And one thing to do is probably to get the students to keep their cameras turned on. In my school, at least, we haven't had a lot of parents kind of sitting next to the child and helping them. A lot of parents are sitting in and listening to what we are saying, but I suppose we just have to juggle it as we go along the best way that we can. Every person's situation is different, yeah? Yeah, Microsoft Teams are great to use as well. Meet is great as well. I mean, I've used those. It's just that our school uses Zoom, so it's just something that I'm more familiar with. Okay. Any other questions that I can assist with? Just looking to the questions.
I think I have just checked through. I think we have answered most of the questions that were submitted. We do have about 8 minutes left. So if anyone does have any questions, do post them now. I think we've had a couple more messages in. I think it's more of a comment and reflection.
A comment, definitely. I think I think kudos to all of us. Firstly, I must say a huge kudos to you for turning up wherever you are in the world, especially if you're in Europe and in Americas and you've gotten up early or you've not slept yet in order to attend this workshop. I think one thing that I've learned in terms of after I kind of mastered online learning, when we came back to school, then it's hybrid learning that we have to go through. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I do hybrid when I have students in front of me and I've got to also communicate with the laptop in that sense. So that's again back to your school's policy, how much of in-person and on-computer teaching you need to do, and how to balance that, because our students who are in front of us have taken the time and the risk as well in order to turn up to school, and we don't want to give them less of what they should receive. Yet it's absolutely understandable that we have students and parents who are very nervous of having their children come back to school for whatever reasons. So students back at home should also not be at a disadvantage. So what I've done is, what you can see here is I've propped my iPad, my laptop a little bit higher. That's another tip that I would want to give you, even if you're doing Zoom and Meets. What I've done is I've put a few books on top of my laptop. So if you can see this, I'm slightly better. I'm not looking down on the laptop. That gives myself a sense that I'm not looking down on my students, and also the camera is almost eye level with me, so the students can kind of have better eye contact as well. A lot of times I also like to look into the camera as compared to looking at my screen, especially when I'm already familiar with what the students are doing and also what the content is. So I'm looking at the camera because I actually don't really need to look at the screen if there's nothing to look at in the screen. Hopefully that gives some learners a sense that, hey, the teachers look at me, she's actually, I better be paying attention, she's actually looking at me. But when I did my hybrid learning, it's also kind of the same thing. Laptop in front, I'm in front of the classroom, the laptop is facing the screen where I'm doing my projection. The students who are attending class is just around and we're just talking and having the learning. It kind of just has, yeah. I think in terms of the recording of the session, I think the moderator has replied to that you will get a recording of this. Cambridge will make that available yet. Okay, later on at a different time, all right? Right, okay. Okay, great. I can see that we're all celebrating each other. That's great. It's true, yeah, we're all the unsung heroes. I suppose one final tip would be, please get the right balance, because I think when I started for the first 3 months, there was no morning, no night, crazy hours. You know, we are not going out to get our regular haircut. We're not going out to get our regular, I don't know, manicure, pedicures. So it can really feel suffocating as well. So we've got to really pace ourselves well. And then I took my focus off myself and I thought about the students. Some of the students are in home situations which are not so conducive. We could be teaching students who don't know a lot of things that we are teaching in terms of at home. The parents or the home may not be first language users in terms of in using English. That's in countries where English is not the first language, right? So sometimes when we deliver the content, bear in mind that students don't have another person to bounce off ideas with in that sense. If we're teaching literature and we're teaching a poem and the student doesn't really understand, they sometimes don't have that person to go to as easily accessible, right? So make yourself available, have those 15 minutes extra at the end of your lesson to say, guys, I am going to end the class now, but I need Jack, Jane, and Jill to stay online because I want to just catch up with you guys. So if in a week you make 3 or 5 different students stay back, not stay back after your lesson, but the last 10 minutes of your lesson, then you can catch up with them on a one-on-one or one-on-5 basis in order to make sure that they are doing all right, okay? So as I said at the start, these are just really practical, hopefully relevant tips. As you can see, my presentation didn't go on for the whole hour because I was anticipating some questions, and I think the questions are more relevant to you as well, okay? Yes, you see me at the bottom left, but that's okay. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time. I am privileged to be able to share my experience and continue on, I would say, unsung heroes at least. You know that there's support from Cambridge, and you know that Cambridge website also has various things that we can look into. And I hope that our experience here with the Cambridge Schools Conference has been a positive and a valuable one. Thank you, guys. I hope to see you in person one day. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.